Pre-season testing is right upon us, and there are tons of stories that we should be looking forward to. The most important one is the behaviour of the cars, the feedback that the engineers will receive from the drivers, as well as the phenomenon of sandbagging and whether or not teams will apply it. But with so many talking points about 2025 being the most competitive campaign we've seen in quite a while, what should we expect from the 3-day testing in Bahrain? One of the most important things to understand is how the testing will be conducted. 3 days, each one containing 2 sessions in which only one driver can participate from the team. This will enable a maximum of 10 drivers to be on the grid, and therefore a crowded track won't be an issue for the teams and the drivers to gather all of their information. The first day should be the most dull one in terms of expectations, because it's the one where the teams are going to test whether the tests they've done over the winter will translate on the car. Of course, this involves a lot of paint, viz and flow rakes, because almost all of the teams have come up with new designs and concepts, changing everything up to 100%. Therefore, you would understand that the CFD and wind tunnel data would have to be up to date with the on-track performance, and it might take a couple of laps with a certain car to understand whether or not it's going to be a championship conquering one. This comes after a very difficult period for teams like Mercedes and Red Bull, who struggled to find performance in the past couple of months with the mid-season upgrades. So now, with the increased amount of wind tunnel time, they're definitely going to invest a lot in these 3 days of testing. According to Bernie Collins from Sky F1, it's going to be pivotal to see all of these changes in Bahrain, because even if a team sandbags its performance and hides the majority of it, it's not an automatic indicator that they are not going to be competitive in Australia. Just because the team learns a lot about a car throughout the testing, it doesn't mean they're going to show all of their cards at once. That happened with Aston Martin back in 2023, but when the mid-season development came, they fumbled hard. Therefore, a very important part of the test, which will come in the second and third day, is understanding the behaviour of the challenger on a longer pace basis, where drivers will do race pace simulations and cooling of the tyres. The most important thing would be to put the car in the optimal working window, and the wider it is, the more opportunities the team will have to experiment regarding the nature of the track and the weather conditions met at that certain track. Elaborating further on this, Bernie Collins said, "You're always pretty excited before testing. You will have seen loads of reports from management of the aero development about how they think the car will be, so there will be lots of discussion of how fast you think it will be or what development could happen. The biggest thing is you can never use that to say how competitive you're going to be. Even if they say the car is going to be 3 seconds a lap faster around Barcelona, for example, you don't know what everyone else has done, so there is excitement but mixed with uncertainty. There's always something in a car's design that's a bit nervous, be it for a reliability issue or something else." Now, there are certain teams that will draw more attention than others, starting with Red Bull, because the Austrian squad are now focused on bringing the absolute maximum to the RB21 to Verstappen if he wants to defend for the championship for the 5th consecutive time. If there is someone who can do it, it is definitely the Dutchman, but what's worth mentioning is that Red Bull have fallen down the order, and the only ace up their sleeve that they have is the increased wind tunnel time. So we could be expecting a bit of a sandbag from the Austrian team, because they would want to map out the aerodynamic issues of the car and use significant time and budget from the 2026 season in order to fix it and make a great stride towards the Drivers' Championship in 2025. On the other hand, Ferrari and McLaren will be under the critical eye of the media, because these are the teams that are expected to fight it out at the front. The adaptation of Hamilton has gone extremely well so far, and there is no doubt that he is going to be a massive threat to the rest of the championship if the car suits him as well as Leclerc, even though the initial reports from Fiorano suggest otherwise. The deficit to the Monegasque driver was quite big, 0.8 of a second, and during the Barcelona shakedown it wasn't satisfactory as well, although it's worth mentioning that they were running a different program compared to each other with different loads of fuel. This suggests that in Bahrain, the drivers will likely undergo changes in the form of what suits them the most and what are the biggest weaknesses they have to address. For Hamilton, that would be the one-lap performance, as well as keeping the car in its optimal operating window. And if he manages to gel himself with the SF25, there is definitely a great ingredient to have quite a competitive season ahead of us. And in the second and third day of testing is where we'll probably get the real action on its way. This is the part where teams will try to extract the absolute maximum out of their cars once they've established that the car matches everything they hoped for back in the winter and throughout the simulation runs. Here is the time where the teams will start to look into different tyre and cooling strategies, and the fans will have a better understanding as to what we should expect from the teams on the grid. Again, there is no doubt that some of the top dogs will hide performance as much as they can, because obviously they don't want to reveal all of their aces before the first races come in Australia. But they also don't want to be caught by the surprise of not seeing the absolute greatest out of the car and be behind in the development race. Pre-season testing is also very important because the teams will understand the performance of certain parts, and if they feel like there is more potential to be extracted, they can work on it very early in the season. This is why Ferrari announced that they will have an upgrade package ready to be delivered to the SF25, even though they are yet to debut with the car on the track. This could either mean that they have high trust in the car's initial runs and the fact that they've done such a good job over the winter, or they've failed to develop a certain part of the car to its greatest extent, so it will be the first one to be upgraded once the season starts. Teams that will definitely draw our attention are Mercedes and Aston Martin, because while it is believed that they will focus on 2026 very early in the season, it's quite the opposite. Russell said it the best: the season is far from over, and the team managed to find solutions on the W16 without creating new problems, which is ultimately what matters the most. Up until now, every solution that they created for the previous cars opened up another issue that they couldn't solve, but it might not be the case this time for 2025. Both Allison and Elliott are happy with the progress that has been made. The only thing that we'd need to be concerned with is the adaptation of the youngest driver on the grid, who will be expected to deliver strong results from day one. Antonelli is not your ordinary rookie. He is the one who's been dubbed to be the next Verstappen, and if he fails to live up to these expectations, a lot of pressure will mount on him and it will definitely affect his performance. Therefore, the 3 days in Bahrain will serve him with a lot of experience regarding the behaviour of the W16. As for Aston Martin, the team is debuting with a brand new AMR 25 that is around 100% different compared to its predecessor. Similarities have been shown between this version of the car and the MCL 39 as well as the SF 25, which means that while copying directly is not the way to go in this sport, especially when the regulations are very strict, there needs to be a very cautious approach in your design. It's not the same as we saw back in 2020, because now we have people like Newey, Cardile and Cal being employed by Aston Martin, and while their work will be visible from 2026 onwards, it's been believed that they had a lot of influence on the 2025 car as well. So to expect that they will fight for something more than P3 in the Constructors' Championship is a bit of a far-fetched scenario, but on the other hand, it would be a massive improvement and a great achievement headed into the new season. Most likely the team will show strong qualities during the pre-season testing, but even with such a poor performing driver like Lance Stroll behind the wheel, the expectations for Aston would be a bit higher than usual. A very important thing that we need to pay attention to is the communication between the drivers and their race engineers. This will be pivotal for everyone to understand how the car behaves and how we're going to see the integration of new drivers with their race engineers. For example, Adami and Hamilton are yet to find common ground on their communication. This is what Bernie Collins said, and when talking about it to a greater extent, the Sky F1 pundit added, "The drivers will give good feedback. If their feedback is this car is terrible, then it's going to be a different year. Sometimes there is a test that takes a lot of time to change a component, so it might be a front suspension test which takes a few hours to do. You wouldn't do that in Bahrain, or try not to, because that is so much lost time. Whereas in the shakedowns you have 200 kilometers and time is unlimited, so you can take all the time in the world to change things." With all this in mind, which team do you think will showcase its potential the most during the 3-day pre-season testing in Bahrain? And more importantly, who do you have as the favourite to win it all? Let us know in the comments below.